Embracing Your Mortality Podcast with me, author Sue Brain. If we want to create a better way of living, I believe engaging with our mortality is essential because it reminds us that life is finite and we need to make the very best of who we are so we can contribute something worthwhile to those around us. And my guest today is certainly attuned to the fact that life is finite and is contributing something very worthwhile for anyone who wants to engage with their mortality and contribute to the conservation of trees at the same time. And her name is Sophia Campbell-Shaw, who's the founder of Woven Farewell Coffins, where you can learn to weave your own coffin. And she says for her, making coffins perfectly combines her passion for willow, ecological practices, and supporting the growth movement of family-centric funerals. And what's more, 5% of the proceeds from any coffin that you make with her goes to the Woodland Trust, the UK's leading woodland conservation charity. And Sophia believes that this gifting towards a life-sustaining organisation is symbolic of the life-death-life cycle, which for her is an essential pillar of our philosophy in crafting coffins. Wow, Sophia, that's one hell of a vision that you've created for us. So tell me, how did you get into all of this? How did you start making woven coffins?
Well, it's quite interesting. Do you ever get it when you look back at your life and you see the domino effects that led up to where you are now that you could never have added up at the time? So so my adventure with coffins really I think began, when I was a kid. I was brought up in a very creative family. My dad is a composer, my mum was an entrepreneur, and so it was a kind of really go get it sort of vibe at home. And then my mum, when I was in my early 20s, my mum died. She had a good death. She had a very supported death. She was really engaging with her dying process. She really welcomed in the community. We had a community timetable of caring for her. And so that really was a beautiful, lasting gift that she gave me, because it was a very formative bereavement that could have been quite traumatic, and I'm sure was on some level, as it could be when your mum dies. But I there was a sense of peace and a sense of container in my experience, and I feel very grateful for that. And so I knew at that point that I was going to be working in death, in the funeral sector or in bereavement in some way. But I knew it was going to come further on, because I wasn't old enough, I wasn't mature enough really. But what I did do at the time was I was gifted a space in a beautiful willow workshop course, and the friend of my mum's, and she basically became my sort of unofficial mentor and gave me some willow. And while I was caring for my mum in the daytime, in the evenings, I would go to her workshop and I'd kind of just play around and learn, and that was a really important kind of creative outlet to give me some joy in a time that was quite heavy. And so the willow started about 12 years ago, and it's kind of filtered and kind of bumbled along in the background. And then when I had about 6 years ago, I had the combination of my sister was killed and my first child was born within a few weeks of each other. And so, as you can imagine, my life just got thrown up in the air, and anyway, as it does when a kid comes along, or a strong bereavement happens. And then when it all landed down, it sort of reconstellated amidst the kind of spaciousness that can happen after bereavement or a child being born. And I thought, you know what, I really feel drawn to the funeral sector for the potential power it can have in people's well-being if it's done right. I feel really drawn to sustainability, and I feel really drawn to willow, and those, you know, there is no other. I mean, I was just compelled, you know, I didn't have a choice but to start making coffins.
It's kind of like this. And do you feel like your sister's, I mean, I can't imagine. I've never, my sibling is still alive. And I can't imagine the trauma of your sister suddenly dying, and then your baby being born at the same time. And talk about life and death just rubbing up together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they, you know, sibling bereavement is, I think, something that isn't talked about very much. And it's just as powerful, can be just as powerful as a, you know, as a parental bereavement or anything.
Even sometimes even more so, because you know, your parents are one thing, but your sibling, when you're sharing your growing up with them. How did she die?
She was killed in action in Syria. She was helping civilians escape from a so she was she died quite in a very brave and respected way, allowing other people to live, protecting them. So that was I mean, there's a whole story behind that. We can go into that in another conversation.
Exactly.
But, international politics were very much on the forefront of her death.
And for you, that really lit the fire to do something, your calling around death and dying.
Yeah, I really felt that cliche, which is a real cliche for a reason, because it's so true. It's like life is too short. Life is way too short not to do what we feel compelled to do, you know. And I was lucky that I had this spaciousness to pivot. And you know, also my sister didn't have a coffin. She was never buried, and although I didn't think about it at the time, she died in a war zone, still an active war zone. I do wonder if on an unconscious level, maybe there was something there of like, we didn't have a vessel, we didn't have a container for my sister, so let me make containers and vessels for other people that have meaning and help with the processing.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know, it didn't, in retrospect, those things kind of add up. So I've been trading as Woven Farewell Coffins for 5 years, and my children, so I've got 2 kids, literally laying on my back or in my belly, or, you know, now the youngest one's 3, so I have a bit more spaciousness. But my firstborn, for a while she thought all baskets were called coffins, which is not the normal childhood information you pick up.
That's so sweet. Oh, look at that lovely coffin, Mum.
I know. Yeah, I have to sort of.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about, I know you work with I think this is right, you work with a family farm or an organization that grows the willow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is that your family, or is it someone else's family that you work in association with?
It's someone else's family. Yeah. So they are a family farm. As in, there's, you know, 4 generations of them that have produced the willow. And but now willow, there's a small group of companies in the UK now. It's quite you know, centralized, because of, you know, the economy of scale, but they're a wonderful company, and so all of my materials are produced in the UK or in Europe, and that's something that's really important to the ethos. You know, people, there's a lot of greenwash, as you know, and it's really important to be very transparent and be as authentic as possible.
Yes. Yeah, that's such a good point. Such a good point. So tell me a little bit more about the coffins. So they're all organic? Your coffins are organic, and just tell me about how they're made up.
Sure. So yeah, they're all biodegradable. They are so the base is made from slats of timber, local timber, pine, or larch or Douglas fir. And then the base is kind of like we have a petal shape. That's our classic for our style. So it's flat at the foot end and round at the head end. So it's a combination of the traditional sort of Victorian vampire-esque
Yes, yes.
and the kind of the double round-ended kind of alternative. And so the base is long wooden slats going from head to foot end and then woven in a perpendicular direction back and forth kind of across the slats. And then so that's a whole section in itself. And then the sides are like most baskets, the sides of the uprights are fixed to the base. And then you weave around the uprights. So if anyone listening has ever
weave a
done any,
basket.
exactly,
Yes.
it's very similar to weaving a basket if anyone's ever done that. And then like a basket, the sides fold over and they become the border.
Yeah.
And the lid is a separate piece altogether.
Right.
It kind of looks like the base. You've got long slats running from head to foot, and then you're weaving across them back and forth. And we have a little plait round the lid edge.
So when people come to you, because I know you run workshops, and I think they're about a week long, aren't they? Or 5 days or 4 days long.
Yeah.
It takes that long to weave a basket. So just talk me
Weave a coffin.
Sorry, weave a coffin.
Okay.
I need to catch your daughters. Baskets and coffins. So just talk me through what would happen if I said, right, Sophia, I want to come and weave my coffin.
So I would say, okay, is it for you or is it for a loved one? Have they died or are they imminently dying? If they've died, then I contact the funeral director for measurements. If the person's using a funeral director. If they haven't, then I say, well, we need to add 4 inches onto the person's living height, because in death you sort of relax out and also the feet fold forward a bit, even though rigor mortis wouldn't be present by the time of lying in the coffin anymore. It's still, it's nice not to have them feet shoved up to the end of the coffin. And then measure the shoulders, and then I'd say, would you like a burial or a cremation? Because with a cremation, because our bases are woven, you have to have a flat board underneath to ensure that the coffin slides smoothly over the cremated rollers. And also in the hearse, sometimes they have rollers to load the coffin into the hearse. And then, would you like a nameplate? Would you like to make your own nameplate? Would you like to come and weave the whole thing with me? Would you like to pop by for a cup of tea and a piece of cake? Would you like to come just to say hi and nothing else? Or maybe you don't want to have any contact. Maybe you just want to do a bish bash bosh transactional experience, which is really what some people at full capacity need, just like a simple exchange of a product without any service behind it.
Because it's so overwhelming often when people die and we don't know what, and thought of going down to weave a coffin is maybe just too much.
It's there's a whole range. And maybe but probably if they do that, they'll be getting their meaning in other ways, doing other sort of rituals, spoken or unspoken of. I don't talk about what I do as a ritual, but it is in essence a way of making meaning. That's just what rituals are. But it can be quite a loaded word. But yeah, so I'll bring some flowers, maybe light a candle if that's the sort of approach the family would like, and just have a space. Some people share about their loved ones, some people don't want to go into it. And some people bring their children. Sometimes it's just one person. I had a couple of weeks ago, I had a lovely wife of the person who died and her son and daughter-in-law and her 2 grandchildren, and they were just sort of running around, getting involved, fighting with each other, going out to see the cows next door because my workshop's on a farm, and it just that sort of normalizing feel for them
Mm.
is so important. Education, as you know, is so important for children around death and
Absolutely.
normalizing it.
So, Sophia, your work, what's it done for your own experience of mortality? I mean, you've had your mum dying when you were young, then your sister
Mm.
died in that way. I mean,
Mm.
where are you with your own mortality?
That's a really great question, Sue. I've had a lot of Buddhist influence, and in Buddhism, there's a lot of focus on the temporary nature of things, and the temporary nature of our life is part of that. And so that's really influenced me a lot. But I don't know. I feel like I'd be fine with death as it is, but I have no idea until I'm right there what my experience would actually be. But I'd like to think that I would have a sense of integration into a bigger picture, a bigger cycle, and a bigger continuum. And I think thinking about deep time of life and people and history, and me being situated in a much bigger movement helps, not only in a feeling of of meaning of my death, but also in what I'm trying to do in the world, in creating small steps towards more sustainable practices and more meaningful practices. Because
Yes.
I heard the other day, it's insane. There's an academic whose name I can't remember now, but I'll tell you if you create show notes. He researches a lot about meaning, and last year in the UK, 4 out of 5 people said that they felt a lack of meaning in their life, which is really it's a big thing that's really not spoken about very much at the moment.
And that's incredibly sad.
Yeah, yeah.
If you
And
feel that you have no meaning in your life, then life's a grind.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of that comes down to the economic hardship that we've got at the moment.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I think, often then people are so unprepared because it is hard to do life when you're feeling like that, and you don't engage with the cycle of life and death. And it's about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? If you
Mm.
you can only start to self-actualize when you've got your basics needs met.
Yeah.
You haven't got that, you haven't got meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
That's really tough. And I often think that death brings people back into asking those questions if they haven't had meaning and purpose. And I wonder if you've come across that in your work.
Yeah, and I would caveat that to say if they're supported in the process, otherwise there can be no space for reflection.
Mm.
That's my opinion anyway.
Mm.
Yes, I I do have a lot of people reflect. Most people who come say it was really important to have that experience to see and feel the coffin, so that when the funeral comes along, I'm not feeling anxious about seeing the physical representation of my loved one, of that coffin arriving, or even if it's there already in the room and I've decided that I don't want to see it come in, but I'm apprehending walking into the room myself, and there can be anxiety around that, and to have already touched it or woven part of it. And it's the same with the coffin clubs, and getting together and drawing, or but any way that we can interact with the coffin before the funeral happens, I think is a real blessing. And so
Yeah.
I do see that meaning coming through in that way.
It's interesting because, gosh, I've been working in this area for a very, very long time, and my dear friend died the other day, and
I'm sorry.
I'm used to coffins and death.
Yeah,
And watching her coffin coming out of the back of the hearse,
yeah,
being taken into the crematorium. Whoa, that just made it's such a symbol, isn't it? It's
yeah,
such a symbol of, oh my God, she's really gone.
yeah,
And I think, however painful that is, there is, I think for me, funerals, I'd be interesting to see what you feel. I think the funerals are so important because they make us engage with the process of that person's dying, death, what's happened between the death and the coming into the crem or being buried or whatever. And it's just, for me, it was an essential part of my grieving process for her. I miss her like crazy, but I'm so glad I went to say goodbye. And I just wanted to know what you felt about that.
Yeah, and saying goodbye in a group of people where there's a shared experience with other people.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
it's really important for a lot of people. And it's interesting with the rise of direct cremations now. I don't know, if you've come across them. And
do you want to say a little bit about what they are for people that don't?
Yes, exactly. So direct cremations are a new form of cremation, and you can also get direct burials. They've been offered, I think, from the funeral sector for a while, from the funeral directors, but just before COVID, basically a big company came online which offered this experience, which is cutting out the ceremony at the crematorium. So the person gets picked up from the hospital mortuary or from the hospice or maybe even from home sometimes, and they get taken straight to a facility, maybe storage for a bit, and then a crematorium, and then the ashes get given back to the family. So the last time they see the person in any form is where they've just died. And so it removes the present way that it's quite mainstream. It removes that ceremony, that saying goodbye in a formalized manner where you're honoring the person's life, and that you just don't have a memorial. Basically, it's taking out the memorial, and it means that it's cheaper, which is really important for a lot of people, and it's partly why it's become so popular. Excuse me. Part of it is because of all of the advertisement and the kind of glossing over the missing out of the meaning making and going straight to, this is cheaper, it's simpler, it's what your children are going to want.
And I don't have to get engaged with my pain or the distress, especially if it's been a very difficult relationship. And that's why, I think, and I've heard you use the word loved one, and I really respect that. But an awful lot of people aren't loved. That, there isn't that loving relationships. And I can imagine if somebody, for instance, was very abusive and they've died, actually for the family left behind or the children left behind, that kind of right, they're gone might be quite helpful until they're ready in the future to maybe make a ritual around it.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes families can think that it's a person, if they're dying, they can think that that might be the right thing for their children, and actually if there's been a distressing relationship, their assumption might be wrong, and actually to come together just after the person's died is really important to create some closure as well. So the flip side, that very important point you just made.
Yes.
So there's what's I can't remember why I brought up direct cremations, but it was around just new things that are coming up, but what I think can really be a great way to make a cheaper and more affordable funeral is to have the direct cremation, but to have the ceremony or the memorial in a place that isn't the cremation chapel, which sometimes they're not everyone's bag, are they? And when you have that 20-minute slot, can feel a bit rushed.
Very rushed.
Yeah, so to have something that you maybe have put a bit more time into organising, which people don't always have the capacity to do, something that you've done that you're not paying for the hire of the crematorium or all the other costs, the cremation chapel. You have your own memorial.
And it could be in the garden, couldn't it, at home, or it could be in a field, or it could be walking in a wood with some, as a group, or it could be actually a little pilgrimage somewhere, or anything, but you don't have to pay, as you say. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Because it's very commercial now, the whole dying process. It is a money making machine. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say to anyone listening to this going, do you know, I really want to engage with my mortality. I want to go to Sophia and I want to learn how to make my own coffin. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say have a look on my website, wovenfarewell.co.uk. Have a look at my social media, Instagram, Facebook, if you use that and you want to see ideas and experiences that other people have had at Woven Farewell. And yeah, drop me a line, just have a chat, see if it's your sort of thing. And maybe other ideas can come out of that for your funeral as well, for the funeral that you're thinking about planning in advance. We have quite a few people make the coffin in advance and then store it in a shed or in their attic, in a way that people I really advocate a lot for preparing, and I'm sure you do as well, so it's can really be helpful to take the stress out at the end of life.
Yes, and don't forget, when you're making your coffin, I'm sure you talk about this, Sophia, is make a will.
Yeah.
And do your power of attorney if you haven't done already.
Yeah.
It's very easy to download from the government website. I think it's 80 quid, isn't it, for the and it's so easy to do. You just have to name 2 people that are prepared to be your, I think they're sponsors, but they'll step in when something happens to you, when you die, so that you're not leaving a mess behind. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it, Sophia? Is that what you talk to about them as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a hypocrite, actually, because I'm 34. I have not yet made my will, and maybe this is the time. After this, I'm gonna get off and do my own will, because it is it's easy to put it off, especially younger people, but you never know, especially when they're
And I think that's such a good point. You're only 34 and you're doing this amazing work in the world. Oh my God. At 34, you're helping people to really address the depth of who they are, which is about my relationship with my own mortality. It's incredible work you're doing, Sophia.
Wow, that's very kind of you, Sue.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your vision for the future?
Well, my vision is to have more rental coffins. From an affordability and a sustainability point of view, they're really in line. I'm actually designing and have designed the world's first rental willow coffin,
The
which
first what?
the world's first rental willow coffin. So you have
Whoa. That's amazing. You have to say something more about that.
Sure. So it came out of being in touch with funeral directors and coffin makers from the US, where rental coffins are more common because they have more of a stronger connection between the funeral homes and the crematorium. So person can be, displayed in sometimes one of those American style caskets, and then transferred into an MDF or a cardboard coffin for the actual cremation. So the people, they don't have to buy this. I think they're like $3,000 caskets or something. And I thought, you know what? Why doesn't that happen in the UK? Has it happened? Yes, it used to be a lot more common, even until up to the 80s. And there's one conventional funeral director in the UK that has a rental coffin as part of their standard package. Really, very commonly used. And what they have and what other people have is a cardboard insert that sits inside a coffin cover, if you like, a willow coffin or a oak planed coffin. So it's been great fun. We're on version 2, and what happens is, so there's lots of willow panels and they fix together with quick release fastens on the corners, and so the funeral director will have one, and then it's rented out to the family or rented out directly from us. And so the family needs to buy a cardboard coffin as well. And the person, the deceased, lies in the cardboard coffin, and after the cremation, after the the memorial or whatever, with them in the willow casket, then the cardboard coffin is cremated. So the cardboard coffins, I think at cost price, they're £90. And maybe the willow coffin gets rented from the funeral director for £100. That's £190 for a willow experience. And because cardboard coffins are great, but they're not for everyone.
Yes. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Sophia, I just love the work you're doing. I just love the fact you're so young and you're doing it. And I love the fact you've got this vision to really challenge, how our relationship with coffins.
Yeah.
That's marvelous. Is there anything you'd like to say just to finish off, that you'd like to say to anyone about moving on, or advice or something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just very grateful that you've asked me to come. And I just really encourage anyone to do their research, spend some time, take the courage to talk to their loved ones, and think outside the box, proverbial box, or not, or maybe just go down the traditional route and just really take some time to think in advance about that. And there are lots, Google's great nowadays. You can find lots of different options, lots of small makers that can create a lot of meaning. So thanks very much for inviting me.
Oh, well, we're all going to go one day. So whether it's tomorrow or it's, years down the lines, then we all need to start thinking about how we can put things into action, as I said, so we don't leave a mess behind for our family to clear up. Really important. Sophia, thank you so much. That was absolutely lovely to speak to you.